Bienvenidos todos los personas. Esto es el podcast de Hijos de Ars. Oh my gosh. Well, I tried.
Yeah.
We are back finally.
Yeah, this is Micah Flores.
And this is Ian Wintering.
And we just got back. Well, we didn't just get back, but we got back from the summer. In early August, I came back in. I flew back into Denver on August 3rd in the afternoon.
Yeah, I flew back August 6th or something like that, but yeah, around the same time.
And I was coming back from Puebla, Mexico over the summer. And Ian, you were coming from...
I was in Guatemala for 7 weeks and Honduras for 3. So.
Yep. So
yeah.
We hope you enjoyed all the wonderful podcasts that Jacob and Tony were putting out over the summer. We're hoping that they'll continue to guest host with us throughout, or not guest host, but trade off with us throughout this next school year.
Yeah. And
we're looking forward to being back. It's kind of surreal.
What they didn't realize, I was listening to the podcasts over the summer that they were making, and they kept joking about like replacing us and stuff. What they don't realize, is that was actually a job application for them.
Whatever.
They just got hired. But yeah, so there's been a couple structural changes, just so you know. So the reason why we added on 2 people to help us with the show is because it's not technically part of our apostolate anymore. And so we just needed the extra help. So expect to hear from them in the future for different episodes and stuff. So.
And they did a great job this summer. We're super grateful for
definitely
everything that they're doing. And they're just like a good dynamic duo together. And so it'll be fun working with them this next year. And hopefully we can all come back on the show together a couple
we'll
times
have to do some
too.
sort of reunion episode. So this episode, we really just wanted to sit down with you guys and kind of just update you, I guess, with the graces that we received over the summer, and all the things that happened to us. So funny story, I almost died.
I
mean, not really, but I mean, but kind of. I almost kind of died.
Yeah, it was an awesome summer. So if you don't remember, we were sent down to learn Spanish and to just kind of get to know the Hispanic culture,
right?
In Mexico and then in Guatemala and Honduras for Ian, because the Hispanic populations in Colorado and in Arizona are just growing so much. Right. Well, and then you go to some of the parishes, so Father Luis was an old formator at the seminary, and he's at Holy Rosary now. And just from having conversations with him when he's come back to the seminary, it's like every weekend, like 5, 6, 7, maybe more, maybe like 15 sometimes, 15 baptisms, and then like 1 quinceañera on the weekend. And then the next day it's like all the masses, because usually there's just so many masses because there's so many people that are coming to the mass, and and then it's just packed. It's like all the seats are taken up to the back, and it's really beautiful in a sense, because it's just the faith and the people is so strong. And I realized that when I was in Mexico too.
Yeah.
So the first weekend I was down there, I was looking for the mass schedule, just like trying to figure out where I was going to go. And like, basically there's a mass on the hour every hour. So it's starting at like 8 a.m. 8 a.m. was like the first mass at the big cathedral in the middle of the Zocalo, which is like the main square in Puebla. And they have a mass at 8. And then it gets done. The priest processes to the back, maybe like blesses a bunch of rosaries and like says hello to the people as they're walking out. And then he doesn't even change his vestments. He processes in for the next mass.
Oh my
Celebrates another one at 9.
Wow.
I saw this. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is nuts. And I was thinking down there, I was like, if you miss Sunday mass when you're in Mexico, you literally have no excuse. Like, if you can't find a mass time, then you were purposely avoiding it.
Man.
Yeah. And then, so you were in Guatemala for like 6 weeks?
7. So
7 weeks.
So my time was split, and the reason is so the part in Guatemala was mostly just studying. So we lived with the host family there that was affiliated with the school that we went to. It's called Probigua. Whereas Honduras, we were actually down in a little town called Comayagua, which is where the Missioners of Christ are stationed. So if you're not familiar with them, it's like it's a pretty international missionary group. And we were sent down there to do mission work for essentially for 3 weeks. And it was super awesome. It was, the first week was actually, we were at the seminary there in Comayagua, got to know the seminarians, and then 2 weeks of doing like door-to-door ministry in like, I mean, honestly, calling them little towns is a huge overstatement.
Pueblitas.
Like when I say town, I literally mean a dirt road in the middle of the jungle that occasionally has a house on it every mile or two. And the church in that local area is like a concrete building about the size of like a average kitchen in somebody's house.
Cow. Oh my gosh.
Like it was crazy. And the door to door there is very different than here because everybody's already Catholic. So it's more of like door to door catechesis because they only get mass once a year.
That's really beautiful, actually.
Right. So, and it's so beautiful because they're, even before they know that you're missionaries, they're already inviting you in the house and offering you coffee and giving you food. And after the 7th house of drinking straight coffee, like all day, you're just like
shaking.
Thank you.
You're just like shaking. You're like, you receive the coffee cup in your hands, just like all jittery. You're like, your heart's beating really fast because you've had way too much caffeine.
Right. Well, and they put loads of sugar in their coffee.
Oh my God.
You would think,
yeah, same in Puebla.
Like a lot of our coffee comes from Central America, so you would think like, oh, it's going to be like just pure coffee.
Right. Really
like,
good.
No. And you ask for
flavor
ask for black coffee, and they're like, wait, you want it with less sugar? And you're like, no, like sin azúcar. And they're like, no sugar? You want it just black? And you're like, yes.
You got bit by a mosquito or something. What happened?
Okay, yeah. Okay. So like I said earlier, I almost died. Kind of. So there is a disease that you can get down, specifically in Honduras. It's where it's mostly kind of prevalent. And it's called dengue virus. And for those of you that aren't familiar, it's a mosquito, or it's transmitted by a mosquito bite. And a lot of people actually do die from this down in Honduras. And it's not necessarily the lack of access to medication.
Right.
It's more of just an ignorance about the disease because the symptoms are very, very similar to the flu. And so most people that get it, they just think, oh, I have the flu. It'll, I can
it'll pass in a few days or something like that.
And then what happens is if you don't get it treated, you get internal hemorrhaging and then you die. But it's not serious in the sense that it's really very treatable. Easy. It's very easy to treat.
So I was at a language institute down in Puebla, and so unfortunately there wasn't too much time for that much mission work. We were in classes from 9 to 1. We had a break for lunch, and then from 2:30 to 4:30 we went around the city with a guide or a guia, that's what we called them. And just practicing our Spanish and stuff like that. So the last week, this was like our one kind of like little taste of mission, was we had met the Missionaries of Charity.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So they have a house down in Puebla, and we saw them after this huge Corpus Christi procession. One thing that's also different about the culture that I just love is just like the faith is expressed in such a different way, in such a beautiful way. On Corpus Christi, the one of the main streets going into the Zocalo was completely shut down for like 10 blocks. And they had a Eucharistic procession from this church, Our Lady of Mount Carmel, all the way to the cathedral. And I mean, there's just this huge monstrance. And then as we're processing towards the cathedral, there's people coming out on the balconies in their little like apartments and stuff like that. And they're throwing like rose petals and flowers and stuff like that onto the Sanctissima. And then we passed by a little church, and these nuns kind of like crawl out from their cloister, and are like up towards the top of their fences, like throwing their roses and stuff like that onto the Sanctissima. It's just like so beautiful. Yeah, I was like amazed, because I was in this procession with everybody looking around. I'm like, this just never happens like in the United States. Like this beautiful outward expression of the faith lived out in the streets. But we processed to the cathedral, and then there's a huge beautiful mass, and we get done, and we met the Missionaries of Charity, and then we met another group of nuns called the Conceptionistas, and they invited us over to their house to have lunch, and they cooked us like this incredible meal because there's a huge feast day, and yeah, it was just so beautiful. But we met the Missionaries of Charity there, and then like a few weeks later, we finally got a hold of them and got to go over and serve with them for like 2 or 3 afternoons. And one of them had been stationed like all over Central America, and like had been in India, had been in so many different countries. And we're like, sister, like that's crazy. Like, how did you learn all the different languages? Like, how did you do it? And she just looked at us and just very simply said, love is the language that transcends all other language.
Wow.
And we're just like, oh my gosh. Like, because we're in the midst of trying to study, and there's just different moments throughout the summer where my eyes were just not completely fixed on the Lord the whole time.
Right.
Like I was getting caught up and focused too much on learning the language. I was still praying and stuff like that, but it was just easy to forget about the ultimate end, and to get caught up in the immediate end, the immediate goal of trying to learn a little bit of Spanish. And then this just like really brought me back, and just like kind of hit me over the head, like, and helped me to remember, what does it matter how much Spanish I know if there isn't charity in my heart?
Right.
Like, what's that going to do for anybody?
Right.
I can speak all the Spanish in the world, but if like people can't see Christ in us, if we can't share Christ through that language because he's not dwelling in our hearts, then it's all for a waste.
Right. Yeah. And I have a similar experience. It was actually funny. Mike and I were talking about this before we started recording. We realized like we had the same like thing going on in our hearts, the Lord working in our lives in a similar way. But I just remember a couple weeks into this 7-week long thing, maybe 2 or 3 weeks into it, I was just completely depressed and super in despair. All I wanted to do was spend the remaining money I had for a plane ticket and fly home and leave everything behind. Right?
Get the heck out.
Yeah. Like, I just felt so lonely. Everything was foreign to me. And the big thing was I was struggling to learn the language. I spent, out of the 7 weeks there, I think I spent 5 weeks just learning the present tense. But I just remember just being so consumed with frustration. But by the grace of God, there was a priest that was also at the school, and he was American. He spoke English. So there's just one day I pulled him aside, and I was like, hey, I need to talk to somebody. Like, I am just really struggling. I don't want to be here. And immediately, he called me out. He saw what was going on in my heart. And he said, what it sounds like to me is that you're comparing yourself and your progress to others. And you need to stop that right now, because the Lord doesn't want that.
Dang.
Yeah. I was like, yeah, I think you're right. Like, like I had made progress.
Of course, yeah.
And that was overshadowed by me looking at the other guys and seeing how well they're speaking in Spanish. And I just got consumed with that and was not even focusing on the fact that I had made progress,
Yeah.
And so he invited me to take it to prayer, and I did. And in the church right next to the school, it's called La Merced. It's one of the more beautiful churches in Antigua. and they have this beautiful side. The whole side altar is lined with gold leaf. It was beautiful, like legitimate gold. And they have this beautiful statue of Mary. And so I just brought it to her in a holy hour of prayer, and she put something very special on my heart in that moment of vulnerability, in that moment of like recognizing my need for help and clarity from the Lord. And she said this to me in prayer. She said, "Look, son, I taught Jesus Aramaic and I taught him Hebrew. I'm pretty sure I can teach you Spanish." And the big thing, kind of like what you said, was you can know all the Spanish in the world, but if you're not a holy priest, you serve no one.
Exactly.
So in this moment, in this time that you have in Guatemala and Honduras, you focus on holiness, and I will focus on you learning Spanish.
Dang.
I will teach you.
Wow.
And it was just like, all right,
let's do this.
But what I noticed was this huge dynamic shift in my mentality down there, because it became less about myself, obviously, less about all this stuff. And I was more free to be myself and to learn the language as it comes to me, right? And not to
just
focus,
like in a natural way,
right?
And in a joyful way,
right? You know,
yeah.
But it was just, I just became in that moment a lot more free to receive what the Lord was going to give me next, which was my trip into Honduras, which was totally different than Guatemala, because again, it was more, Jesus oriented. It wasn't about just going to class. Mm-hmm. We were literally doing mission work. And I had the opportunity to open my heart to these people in Comayagua and in the villages that we would do the evangelization in. And that was incredible. And that couldn't have happened if my heart had not been opened in that moment in Guatemala. Right. And like in this mission work, going door to door and just catechizing, these people. And it's hard for me to communicate. But what I noticed is that, like you had said, like that sister had said, the language of love is universal. And it's the one language that transcends all others. And being in that village for 2 weeks, I felt their love and they saw my love. And there was something that happened there. Like, it was so beautiful. And I remember when I got sick, I had to leave right away. And a lot of the people that I got to know down there, I didn't get to say goodbye. And that was really hard. Like, and I never thought, especially in those miserable weeks when I was in Guatemala, I never thought that I wouldn't want to leave. The whole drive back, I was just like crying.
Because remember the conversation that you had with the priest?
Right.
Get me out of here!
Right, exactly. And I remember the lady that we were staying with in Honduras, she said to me, "When are you coming back?"
Oh my gosh.
And I didn't really think about it. It just came out because, again, it was coming from my heart. I just said, after my ordination.
Whoa.
Like, I'm going to come back, God willing, and I will celebrate Mass for you people. Because even though I can't communicate with you very well, and you can't communicate with me very well, there was a language of love there, and like that's universal. And it was so beautiful to experience that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. And what better driving factor to do anything?
Right.
Like, and this is, I think, one of the biggest things we can take away. Like, if love is driving our actions, like it's not turned in on ourselves. It's not selfish, and it's not self-centered. Right. And I mean, that's like the whole reason we pray. That's the whole reason for the spiritual life is to move out of ourselves, to keep our eyes on Christ crucified.
Right.
Yeah. And so, I guess, that's, I think, one reason why the Lord took us down to,
right.
He took us down to teach us another language.
Right.
But to teach us his love transcends that too.
Right.
And also that we have a home wherever we go,
Yeah.
And this is
kind of that was super
right.
Like life changing,
I know.
I remember like as far as like the universality of the church, right? Like so imagine you're in a foreign country and like you just like nothing is familiar, right?
Mm-hmm.
The food is different, the cars are different, the environment is different, the buildings are different. The fact that you can't put toilet paper in the toilet, it has to go in the trash, like that's different. Like everything is different. But then you walk into a church.
Yep.
And like you had mentioned before the podcast, like the sanctuary candle's still there.
Yep. The tabernacle's there.
The
crucifix is there. I mean, we know this. We know from Scripture, Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And the Eucharist dwells in every Catholic church, is universal. It's always there with us. And so
yeah. And if I may share one more thing, it was like I mentioned before, that first week in Honduras, we weren't doing mission work. We were staying at the seminary in Comayagua. And this is a relatively smaller diocese. They actually founded their own seminary.
Wow.
Interesting. They have a spirituality year there too, which is kind of cool.
Whoop, whoop.
Yeah. So, they maybe have, 30, 40 seminarians, and we got to stay a week there with them. And it was first of all, it was a great environment to learn Spanish, because like their seminary environment is very familiar, like morning prayer, mass,
right.
evening prayer, all that stuff. And so it was again, something that was familiar to me. And it was also just a huge motivation to keep learning the language, because here, sitting across the table from me, is a man who's dedicating his life to the priesthood just like I am, and his story
is so different.
Well, yes, but
similar,
in the sense that the Lord calls everybody in like a unique way, but the structure is the same.
Yeah.
And I'm hearing these people's vocation stories and attempting to tell mine back, and it was just such a great like experience again of that like universality, and then there's also the aspect of like I just like actually made friends with a guy in Honduras. Like how did that happen? Right. There was actually a super embarrassing story with that too. So
are you gonna tell it?
Yeah. So on the last day we were there, they had this little gathering. They gathered all us American seminarians in a circle with all them, and they wanted us to share like an experience we had in American seminary that we thought would be beneficial for them to hear. And again, my Spanish is pretty terrible. And what I attempted to tell them was about the 30-day silent retreat experience here. Except instead of saying 30-day silent retreat, which the word for retreat is retiro, I had said retrete, which means toilet. And so everybody just starts bursting out laughing. And one of my seminarian brothers who knows Spanish really well, he leans over to me and he's like, dude, you just said you were on the toilet in silence for 30 days. And I was like, oh my gosh. So then I changed the subject and I was like, okay, again, what I attempted to tell them was like, look, this week has been filled with a lot of humiliation for me. And I really want to thank you for your patience, for, dealing with me and my terrible Spanish. And again, I don't exactly remember the word I used. I would have to look it up, but I attempted to say humiliation, or to be humiliated, but I had actually used a slang term for peeing your pants. And so by this time, the room is just erupting in laughter, and it's like, okay, first of all, those two mistakes I made are related to each other. It's just, this whole week has been filled with a lot of just peeing my pants. And then on top of that, I was literally talking about being humiliated. I was just, oh my gosh, Jesus, thank you.
Yeah, right. Good grief. Yeah, that's definitely part of learning a language. Yeah, it's good to be back though in Denver. It's good to be back in the seminary, kind of starting the new routine. We just finished our first week of classes,
right.
and we're finally able to get back in the recording studio. And
for season 3.
Yeah. We thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed the summer with Jacob and Tony, and we look forward to having them on again here pretty soon.
We got a lot of good plans for the future. So
yep.
You've been listening to Hijos de Ars.
Sons of Ours. That's ours with an A.
We're bringing that back.
Yeah, right. Yeah, Jacob and Tony are making fun of us the whole summer.
Whoa, guys, what is this? Did you not get the memo? You've been replaced. I was out on a school field trip, and you guys think you can just come record?
Did you not get the memo that the whole summer was a job application?
Yes, and we rocked it. I've been waiting for like 3 minutes, waiting for them to wrap up so I could come in and actually...
Well, they'll hear from you next week.
Yeah. All right, next week we'll hear from me.
Just Jacob. We're just gonna have a monologue with Jacob Machado.
Both microphones. That's Sons of Ours with an A.
We'll see you next time.
See you next time.
God bless. Bye-bye.